What's up, everybody? We made it! We made it to Spider-Man No Way Home! We made it alive. We no longer have to worry about spoilers if you're here. And just a reminder, these videos are made possible by my supporters on this platform, so if you do want to support me, be sure to hit that big, beautiful subscribe button. And be sure to check out the Patreon link in the description below. Honestly, part of me was wondering if we'd ever get to see the day where we would see this film. It's been delayed in other countries due to new COVID-19 restrictions, and if you guys live in any of those countries affected, let me just say from the bottom of my heart, I'm so sorry, and if you're coming here to, I don't know, have it spoiled because maybe you don't care anymore, or maybe you've watched the movie on pirated or something, then again, I really understand. I really wish they would release like an alternative for those countries. Maybe you can stream it in those specific countries, but hey, here we are, Spider-Man No Way Home. And now look, I can fully believe that we got to see a third MCU Spider-Man film. I can fully believe that we got to see a Spider-Man movie this year, but the fact that it was this Spider-Man movie, the fact that this happened, let's get it out of the gate. Guys, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland versus the Sinister Five. Awesome, right? Yeah? Okay, so we got that down. This is awesome. This is a film experience like no other, and that is very much by design. Like, the film could only have that excitement, that level of spectacle with the premise it was dealing with. The three Spider-Men get together to fight villains from the past. Yeah, that's going to be a really awesome experience. It's like a big Spider-Man reunion. As far as sheer excitement, as far as sheer hype is concerned, it is unfair to compare any other Spider-Man film to this, because this is the big event status Spider-Man film. This is the big one. The live-action Spider-Verse that fans have been pining for like, ever since Tom Holland really stepped into the role. And I think people have wanted to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield together ever since there was that first reboot. So naturally, I'm pleased as punch, and when I was in the theater, I have never heard a crowd roar so loudly. I'm from the UK, and I've never seen in a UK theater a crowd go completely nuts. It happened on multiple occasions. It happened when Charlie Cox first appeared in the film. It happened when we first saw Willem Dafoe. It happened when we first saw Andrew Garfield. It happened when we first saw Tobey Maguire. And when we saw the three Spider-Men land together on the Statue of Liberty, it happened once again. The crowd went wild because they would go wild. We've got our childhoods back. If your favorite Spider-Man isn't Tom Holland, you've got your favorite back, unless it's Miles Morales. In that case, but like, speaking of the live action ones, unless you like Nicholas Hammond, but still, you get the point. Actually, I'd be curious to know, is Nicholas Hammond anyone's favorite live action Spider-Man? Just let me know in the comments below if he is. You don't have to tell me if he's not. That seems like negativity for the sake of it, but like, if he is, just let me know. Now, I think for a lot of people, just having Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield back, having those villains back, is going to be enough to make this film a 10 out of 10. And no disrespect to anyone that feels that way. Like, different people have different standards, and I'm not saying that mine are any higher or lower. But what I will say is this. It's kind of too easy, isn't it? Also, just a heads up, I understand that this film is very fresh in people's heads, and there's a lot of hype with this, and people are really enjoying that. And if you just want to stay with that hype, by all means, maybe don't worry about watching this video just yet. And of course, you don't have to agree with what I have to say. I only ask that people be respectful. As I've already had a bunch of jackasses on Twitter being like, this ain't a good take, boss man, blah, 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 blah. I don't fucking give a shit if you think it's a good take or not. It's my take. Because if I'm being completely honest, I do have some fairly mixed feelings. So I guess I'll kind of break it down. It begins where Spider-Man Far From Home left off, and it's a really strong opening. Peter's identity's been revealed, he's been framed for the death of Mysterio, and his life is basically falling apart. One kind of critique I have is that the whole thing of Peter being framed for the murder of Mysterio is very quickly dismissed, just with Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock just like, yeah, no, not a big deal. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. And that is one kind of problem this film has, is it does kind of have to swipe some things to the wayside in order to get things going. But Peter Parker's identity reveal has ongoing consequences throughout the film. I like that Ned and MJ can't get into MIT because of their affiliation with Spider-Man. and so Peter kind of wants to help them get into MIT. His whole reason for wanting his secret identity to be reset is because he wants Ned and MJ to have a chance to get into MIT. He doesn't even care about himself anymore at this point, and that I really, really love. That stuff right there is pure Spidey stuff. Spidey's friends and loved ones paying the price for Spider-Man's very existence, with circumstances that are kind of out of Peter's control. Pure Spidey goodness there. The problem is, and this is where some really major cracks start to show, I feel like Peter Parker has been kind of made a bit too stupid in this film. He's book smart, he's not street smart, but like he's kind of ridiculously not street smart in this film. Like, one example is when Doctor Strange is doing the spell and Peter keeps talking and saying, oh hey, can MJ know this and that, and that's all fine, but then there's a point where literally the ground is breaking below them and Peter's like, oh yeah, you need to make sure that Happy doesn't know or something. I'm like, look, just shut the fuck up, you goddamn idiot. Like, you can see it's going wrong. Are you that fucking oblivious? It's like, it's cartoonishly stupid at that point. And then we follow that up with Peter confessing that he didn't even bother to try and contact MIT himself. And it is kind of like, they acknowledge this. I get it. Like, surely you would call MIT, but the fact that he didn't and he immediately went to Doctor Strange first, that is kind of Flanderization right there. But I can kind of overlook this. I can kind of overlook it. It's not the end of the world. Very few movies are perfect, but this is a very inconsistent characterization for Peter Parker. So then, of course, with the spell having gone wrong, Dr. Octopus emerges, the Green Goblin emerges, they all come back, and Peter has to fight them all. Now, the fight scene at the bridge between Doc Ock and Spider-Man is really cool, and it's cool to see the Iron Spider with his own set of back legs going up against Dr. Octopus, and just kind of Doc Ock's reaction to the Iron Spider suit. This is all really awesome stuff. And it's here where Doc Ock kind of steals some of Peter's nanotech, and I wish we could have seen that actually, you know, power him up, because it doesn't seem to do anything. Like, does it shield the tentacles? It just makes them red. Like, why did he even bother doing that? And then Peter then uses the Iron Spider and the nanotech particles attached to it to take control of Doc Ock's tentacles, which is a cool way of getting out of it. I just wish we'd seen Doc Ock take the nanotech and use it to his advantage, rather than just making the tentacles red. Now, the point in time where Doc Ock has been pulled from is just before his death, when he was choking Peter Parker and the giant sun device was about to fall into the sea. Shortly before his redemption and his sacrifice, so no, they do not retread over Doc Ock's redemption. They don't ruin that. Great, fine, but I will be bringing this up later. So Peter is going around gathering up the different multiversal characters from the previous Spider-Man films, and I really like that stuff. Like, just the hunting down these different characters, great. And when we heard that brief moment of Electro's theme music, I was thrilled. I didn't think we'd hear that, but we do. And I like that the film didn't forget that Sandman was redeemed. He kind of goes back to being a villain, though, at the drop of a hat. They kind of established that he's still got some kind of trust issues from, like, his criminal past, so he struggles to trust Spider-Man, and that causes him to go rogue at the end, but I don't know if I entirely buy it, but I get it. The film's got a lot to get through. The main one they need to catch is Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. And having Willem Dafoe back as Norman is amazing. If you were looking forward to seeing that classic 2002 Green Goblin suit, bad news, you've kind of seen all of it in the trailer. It's just a brief appearance, and then he gets his new look later on. But still, cool to see it regardless. Also, the explanation behind Jamie Foxx's Electro's redesign being that the energy works differently in the MCU, really good stuff. This is the thing, there's so much in here that is amazingly well thought out, but then there's just stupid shit, like Peter didn't bother talking to MIT. So Doctor Strange comes up with a spell to send the enemies home to where they came from, but it means that they have to die. Well, Doc Ock and Green Goblin have to die. Maybe Electro, depending on whether or not you interpret that as death or the dissipation of energy. The Lizard and Sandman don't really factor into that much. They're just kind of about, and they're fun to have around, and I really like seeing them in the final battle and everything. They're kind of just there for the reunion purpose, and that's fine. They're decent little side characters, but they don't play an integral role in that whole sort of Peter's grand plan to save the villains kind of thing. So what happens next is we get this massive fight scene between Peter and Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, and it is phenomenal. Peter wanting to save the villains, Doctor Strange knowing that they have to go back and it's their fate, and the way Peter is able to escape the mirror dimension first and take matters into his own hands using mathematics, really cool stuff. An absolutely amazing fight scene that makes really great use of the CGI that Marvel is so renowned for. And I love the idea of a Spider-Man film where Peter's plan is to save the villains. And it's like the MCU has a wealth of different tech. It's more ahead scientifically than those other universes. So Peter is able to conjure up different cures for the different enemies, including an antidote for the Green Goblin. And I have to say, the scene where Spider-Man restores Doc Ock's inhibitor chip and Doc Ock turns into the good Otto Octavius, some of my favorite stuff in any Spider-Man film. Honestly, I think Doc Ock is one of my favorite characters in this, simply because we get to see more of the real Otto Octavius, even though he's still got those tentacles on his back. And there's this really lovely scene where Doc Ock is saying to Norman Osborn, like, how does it feel that you're going to become whole again? I absolutely adore that stuff. But Electro's kind of going rogue. He doesn't want to lose his electric powers. He wants to keep them and gain more power. He wants an arc reactor. So he kind of goes rogue, as does Sandman and the Lizard. Sorry, just forgot to mention, there's also this really nice moment where Doc Ock returns the nanoparticles to Peter, and it creates the integrated suit. It's just really touching seeing this tentacle just giving him those pieces of the nanotech back. There was also a moment where I was so worried that Doc Ock was going to flirt with Aunt May, and he didn't. This moment where Aunt May's like, so, you drink salt or fresh water? Because, you know, him being an octopus and stuff. I thought he was going to start flirting. He doesn't, thank Christ. And then there's a moment where Peter's spider sense starts going off intensely, and Norman Osborn becomes the Green Goblin, and it's such an awesome fight scene ahead. This 1v1 between Peter and the Green Goblin as they fight. It's also seriously violent. Like, Peter tries to fuck up Norman, and you see Norman's raw strength. He hasn't got his gadgets on him or anything. He's just using that Goblin serum to just fuck up Peter Parker, and he's near unstoppable. Aunt May then tries to administer the cure to the Green Goblin, but it doesn't work, and the Green Goblin kills Aunt May? Holy shit! And Peter feels responsible for Aunt May's death because he could have just sent Norman home to his own death. Instead, he tried to save him, and now it's cost him Aunt May. And Aunt May gives Peter the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech, and it's great filmmaking stuff, but what's the implication for MCU Spider-Man then in that case? Did Uncle Ben not kind of wrap this up? Peter doesn't seem all that familiar with the phrase when he hears it. So maybe this was just an extended origin story and they've just passed Uncle Ben over to Aunt May? I guess we'll see in Spider-Man freshman year, but honest to gosh, yeah, not sure how I feel about this because we've had people kind of complaining a lot that Uncle Ben doesn't feel relevant to the MCU Spider-Man at all. And I've kind of been of the school of thought of just because they didn't show it, that doesn't mean they contradict it, but there are some things in this that I do feel kind of teeter on the edge of contradicting that. And the fact that Peter doesn't have any familiarity with that saying or anything, and that Uncle Ben's story definitely gets passed over to Aunt May instead, it hits the same beat, it still works, it's just a different character. It's good stuff, it's a good story on its own merits, but there's a lot of people that are going to be thinking they were right now. I'm not one for presumptuousness, right or wrong, but still. Definitely opens up some questions about Peter Parker's past, which I guess we'll have answered in freshman year, so not much to worry about there. So now Peter's all on his lonesome. And there's this amazing scene where J. Jonah Jameson is talking about the death of Aunt May on the Jumbotron, saying how it's all Spider-Man's fault, and Spider-Man just sat there just watching it play out, and it's just an incredible scene, easily one of the finest MCU Spider-Man moments. It's really got that raw feel to it, really well directed, it looks really beautiful, incredible scene right there. So then it's discovered that Ned is able to use Doctor Strange's sling ring to open up portals, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did Doctor Strange not have to train for years to do this? And Ned can just kind of do it straight away at will? This is kind of an issue with this movie for me, is it feels like characters are just forced into having specific levels of ability and intelligence for the sake of certain scenes. But then Ned is saying how he wants to talk to Peter and he wants to see him, so he casts a magic spell that will cause Peter to appear, but it's the Andrew Garfield Peter. You should have heard the audience absolutely roaring. It was so good to also just hear some recognition for Andrew Garfield. And might I just say, it is so nice to see him again in a movie that I actually really enjoyed. Like, awesome. And then also Tobey Maguire gets summoned through another portal when they're still trying to find Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and they just have this discussion between the two of them, and like the other characters, and Ned's mother does not approve of the Spider-Man and wants them to clean up their webs. And yeah, all really cool stuff. I will say this, the dialogue at times between the other two Spideys, it's MCU dialogue, very much so. And this is kind of my issue with this whole Spider-Verse thing in this film. It starts to kind of in places feel like an SNL sketch. SNL does the Spider-Verse rather than a proper Spider-Verse experience. But of course, the two Spider-Men enlist Tom Holland to help him out, to kind of really get him off of the path of wanting to murder the Green Goblin, and they're gonna go and help him get all of the enemies back and develop the cures, and they work together as a trio, as a team, in this science lab composing all these different cures before going into battle. So one thing that bothers me is that Tom Holland's Peter says that Aunt May's last words were, "With that great power comes great responsibility" line. And Tobey Maguire responds tearfully, "That's what Uncle Ben said." And Andrew Garfield says the same. And Tom Holland doesn't have any reaction to the mention of Uncle Ben. Okay. Yeah, this is starting to get a little bit weird, okay? Like, there was an Uncle Ben, and he definitely died, right? But what did he die of? How did Peter get in that hoodie suit then? In that, like, I mean, he could have done. It's just he's very. Maybe there's a possibility that Tom's Peter is so familiarized with his grief at this point that maybe, like, it's like, yeah, that's all. It's strange. It's a strange one, this. Like, it's definitely opened up some real questions about Tom Holland's Spider-Man for me. Moving over to the final battle, gotta be said, there are some definite similarities to the Spider-Man 3 final fight, in that it's on a construction site of sorts, and there's a Sandman and a Goblin present. And, well, a giant fangy monster. So, like, lizards kind of like Venom in that regard. It's gotta be said, though. Gotta be said, when I was watching it, I was kind of wishing it was as intense as the final battle of Spider-Man 3, but it's not, because it keeps stopping and starting so that the Spideys can have little in-jokes between each other. Like, there's not really a sense of urgency or danger in this fight, more just these, like, moments where they're just joking around about how weird it is that Toby's webs come out of his wrists, and, like, the different enemies that they fought, and they're just kind of having casual chit-chat, and this is great stuff, but in the final battle? There are some moments where things do, you know, have pauses that are good in this final fight, such as Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker and Dr. Octavius being reunited, and Doc Ock noting how much older Peter is, how he's all grown up, and Dr. Octavius is fully redeemed, he's fighting back against the Green Goblin. Beautiful stuff. We've got Andrew Garfield's Peter interacting with Lizard and Electro, and I gotta say, he remembers Electro very differently to what I do, because he's saying like how Max Dillon was the nicest guy ever. If I recall right, the guy was very temperamental and flipped out at you because you forgot his name. Yeah. Also, Electro's just effortlessly cool in this movie. He's so fucking cool. It's all this thrill ride nostalgia tour, but it's definitely far from the most intense and sense of danger in a final battle that we've had. I would say there's definitely less sense of danger this time around than there was in Homecoming and Far From Home's final battle. I guess it's more of a character moment. I guess it's not going for that level of intensity. But still, I kind of wish we could have had like a middle ground, you know? It's what I mean when I say it kind of starts to feel like an SNL skit a little bit. Also, like, this isn't an ideal Spider-Verse fight because they pull off their masks every 5 seconds to talk. You barely get a good look at Tobey in costume in this. He's constantly swooshing around. He's in the distance. And his mask is CGI? Why? Ugh! I do get the feeling that some of the rumors about Tobey Maguire wanting more time out of the costume were true, because when he rocks up, he's just in his civvies, whereas Andrew Garfield spends the entire film in his costume. And the fact that his mask is fucking CGI'd on. Did he not want to wear the mask or something? Get a stunt double or something. I don't understand that. And you can tell it's CGI. There's something slightly off about it. Now, when I say the final fight isn't really all that intense, it does, to be fair, ramp up in intensity once Norman shows up and MCU Peter wants to absolutely destroy him. And he goes in for the kill. He grabs the glider about to stab him, but Tobey stops him. And this is, I like this, but then there's the implication that if Tobey weren't there, would Tom Holland have straight up killed in cold blood? Would he have straight up murdered? Because usually when Peter's about to commit a murder or something, he'll stop himself, but like, damn. Some very weird implications with MCU Spider-Man in this film, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Then Tobey's Peter gets stabbed by the Goblin, but it's played off for laughs, so yeah. And then, okay, so the Green Goblin just, like, splits the multiverse wide open when he throws a pumpkin bomb into Doctor Strange's magic spell box device. And it opens up these different dimensions, and we see these sort of holograms of sort of different Spider-Man enemies. I think I saw Kraven and Scorpion in there. And to close that off, Doctor Strange has to basically make a spell, and this is Peter's idea, that will make the world forget Peter Parker existed. Not just that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but the world will forget Peter Parker, including Ned and MJ. I don't know how doing that restores the multiverse or how he came to that conclusion. Again, weirdly underwritten in places, this film. But the spell works, and all of the villains are sent back home. Wait, just a goddamn minute. The villains get sent home. But where? Okay, so if they get sent back home to their home dimensions, I need to just... So Tom Holland didn't want to send them home because they'd die. It's their fate that when they go home, they die. So his plan was to redeem them and then send them home? I thought the plan was to redeem them and then they could seek refuge in the MCU as a form of divergent timeline. But... Okay, so Norman being redeemed maybe changes the course of things a little bit. We don't know where Norman was picked up from. You know, he could have been picked up from long before his death. Like, the costume wasn't very scuffed up and stuff. He looked pretty pristine out of the lab. Okay, so Norman might have survived. Sandman as well, although he was already redeemed, so this doesn't make that much difference. But hey, he doesn't have sand powers anymore. And same goes for Lizard, even though he, again, was already redeemed. So this is the thing, is this whole villainous redemption plan, this is stuff that already happened in the home universes for the most part. The only villains of the bunch that weren't redeemed were Electro and Norman Osborn. Now, we don't know at what point Electro and Osborn get plucked from, so there's a good chance they could go back and live to die another day. But Doc Ock, the one character that Peter cares about the most, got pulled from during the final battle of Spider-Man 2. So there's still a giant sun device that he has to take care of. You mean to tell me he got redeemed in this universe, which happened anyway in the original film? He got redeemed. So he gets redeemed when he gets redeemed and comes back and he pulls down the sun device? Huh? So he dies. Peter ultimately sends him home to his death, which he spent an entire ass movie not wanting to do. At this point, he might as well have just hit the switch to send them all home. If there were some acknowledgement of the fact that Doc Ock would die, but Electro and Goblin could survive, maybe this could make a little sense. Or if, like, Spider-Man at least questioned this and Doc Ock was just like, I'll find a way, don't worry, trust me, kid, or something along those lines. So it's like most of the characters that survived anyway survive. We don't even know if they killed Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like, people just say he dissipated. This is incredibly half-baked, and this is the resolution to the entire movie. This is a problem. This is a big, gaping plot hole. Also, what are the implications now for the original Raimi trilogy? Is this now a divergent timeline where Norman survived and got redeemed and was able to make things right with Harry? Or does that impact the original Raimi timeline? Because it better fucking not. Also, I'm gonna say this, when it comes to the two Spider-Men, Andrew Garfield steals the show. He's wonderful in this role, and I want to see more of him as Spider-Man now. Tobey Maguire. There's a sense that they didn't know what to do with Tobey Maguire, and that bugs me. Now, I said in a video a long time ago, this was shortly after Spider-Man Far From Home, I made a video on why I didn't think they should do a live-action Spider-Verse, and one of my reasonings was that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is very much reliant on the world building of his universe, because otherwise you just end up with Tobey Maguire playing Spider-Man, but you don't really end up with that quintessential Raimi Spider-Man, because so much of what made that Spider-Man special was the world it existed in. And that problem is definitely present here. Aside from the fact that he spins organic webs, it feels like they didn't know what to do with Raimi Spider-Man. A lot of his lines, you could just swap them out with Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland, and it would make no difference. What you've ultimately got here is just a third Spider-Man that happens to be Tobey Maguire wearing that classic suit. And it's cool to see, it's a cool novelty, but once that novelty has worn off, it's not the big return of Raimi Spider-Man that, you know, you would hope for. Now, I'm not gonna bitch and moan because they didn't give me everything. I didn't see Mr. Dickovich and stuff. There's such a thing as being a little greedy. But I think it definitely outlines kind of, I guess, an issue of doing the live-action Spider-Verse in the form of a third Tom Holland movie rather than its own thing. We don't get to visit those other universes. We do get to have their villains, which is so much better than it would have been if they had them, say, going up against a new villain. That would have kind of made things completely pointless. No, the fact we got some familiar faces present really helps this. And as I say, one of my favorite scenes is between Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina, when they're having their sort of reunion. I loved that. A little more like that would have done the trick. But just for the most part, sadly, during this final fight, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man ends up feeling just a little bit interchangeable. Also, there's that dramatic scene where he gets stabbed by the Green Goblin, and it's like, I would have been a little upset if they'd killed off Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but at the same time, why even bother with that if you're just going to play it off for an MCU joke? Yeah, no, this isn't holding up very well, is it? So anyways, we get the ending where Tom Holland's Peter Parker realizes that rekindling things with MJ and Ned is not as easy as he'd initially anticipated, and I kind of get that, like going up to someone and saying, oh hey, I was your best friend, but you all forgot about me. You're gonna look like a crazy person. So all of the relationships that developed over the course of the MCU Spider-Man films are completely wiped. Alright, okay, really far from sure how to feel about that, but fortunately Tom Holland Spider-Man does get to keep his development, and I guess he's getting a fresh start as he's going to college now, and in the ending, we see that he's making his own suits. He's got this sewing machine, and he's made the classic, the unadulterated classic Spider-Man costume. Red and blue, everything the fans have been asking for. And thus, this 2.5-hour slideshow of character maintenance comes to a close. Followed by 2 after-credits scene. One after-credit scene with Venom. And how exciting that is, especially when he says, we're gonna have to pay that Spider-Man a visit, only to get warped back to his own universe? Why even bother? I was so hyped at the end of Venom 2 to see he was coming to the end of the MCU, and now they just gone? Fuck me! Of course, he leaves a little symbiote behind, so we can bet that we'll be getting the symbiote Spider-Man storyline eventually, but I was so looking forward to just seeing that Venom and that Spider-Man interact, and now it's, what a fucking letdown. What were they expecting? What reaction did they expect? Like, oh, we're gonna tease Venom and Spider-Man meeting. Oh, actually, no. Fuck! Why would you do that? And then the second after credits was a literal trailer for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So I think as we kind of go through this, for the main film, ignoring the 2 after credits, for the main film, I think it's easy to see how you can get so swept up in the spectacle, and there are some really incredible moments in there, and Peter Parker's own character development, aside from a few very flanderized moments and very questionable moments, is really solid. Although it does kind of feel like ultimately what we're left with is a soft reboot. We've closed the book on MCU Spider-Man as we know it, and now we're into a new continuity, effectively, with a more mature Spider-Man, which I think is what a lot of people wanted, but I think it's absolutely come at the cost of the important relationships that were established in the MCU for Spider-Man. What I do like is the opportunity for Spider-Man to do a better job at keeping his secret identity this time around. So all of this is absolutely enjoyable. There's never a moment where I felt bored, but I have to admit, Spider-Man No Way Home is kind of a shambles. And this script, this story definitely needed a lot more time to cook. 2.5 hours was perhaps a little too short for this film because it just flew by, and there are so many implications that are just not clarified to any extent. Implications that would render a whole half of this film pointless. Overall, I liked Spider-Man Far From Home. Heck, I'd go so far as to say I loved it. It's the kind of thing I'd happily rewatch. It's total cinematic comfort food. And it has some spectacular moments, but it has to be said, it's not very good, is it? I'm not gonna say it's a disaster, but like, I've kind of said recently that I feel like Marvel Phase 4 has some issues with characterization, mainly in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, and it's done a very poor job at defining the overall logic they're applying to their multiverse saga, with it feeling more like they're just using the multiverse as an excuse to do whatever than actually defining some actual boundaries for what this thing does and what its implications are, which is necessary. I feel like this whole multiverse saga thing is just lacking in lore, and it's sad to see that the new Spider-Man film, which is the one Marvel thing that I've been excited about, truly, really excited about in a long time, proved to have very much the same problems as the rest of Marvel Phase 4 so far. As a Spider-Man fanboy, I feel fulfilled by all of the cameos and references and reappearances, but as someone who wanted a good story and a really well-made movie, this isn't it. As far as fan service movies go, this seems to lean a little more towards Rise of Skywalker than it does, say, Into the Spider-Verse, and that's really disappointing. You want to know what I really don't like, though? It feels like so much of this was just a distraction. For example, there's a scene where a lawyer tells Peter, oh, the charges from Mysterio's murder has just been waived. No explanation as to how, but don't worry, because Matt Murdock! If anyone else had delivered that line, I feel like a lot more people would be a lot more pissed off with the fact they just completely dropped an entire subplot. And if you ask me what kind of Rotten Tomatoes score I think Spider-Man No Way Home deserves, it would be a 65. Do I recommend the film? Absolutely. Will I buy it on Blu-ray? Absolutely. Do I plan on rewatching this multiple times? Absolutely. But unfortunately, Spider-Man Far From Home is just a thoroughly inconsistent movie that puts hype and spectacle first and completely abandons rhyme and reason. And that, in my eyes, is just not good enough. Well, that sucks. This ended on a downer, didn't it? I'm not happy about this one bit. In the grander scheme of things, I'm glad this movie exists, and I'm glad that we've got it, and I'm glad that it's better than it could have been, but, oh man, it's a mess. Not really sure how to end this video now. I guess I'll brace myself for the dislike ratio, not that anyone can see it anymore because YouTube's gotten rid of that. And no, I'm not going to shill for that, I think that's a fucking stupid decision. But I'm also bracing myself for people calling me an ungrateful brat. Yeah. Okay, here's hoping that Across the Spider-Verse Part 1 gets it right. So what do you guys think? If you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit that big, beautiful subscribe button. And of course, in the description below are links to different social media feeds, including the Patreon. If you're feeling extra generous, like the following people, who are JK Strife, Marcus Ward, Sirius the Skeptic, Biotinarts, Mr. SP, David 20 Covers, Sergio, George is Lost, Legendary Ray Ray, Cheesemaster769, Adam Myers, and Fayalan Schwarzentrau. Thank you guys, you are the best of the best, but as for the rest of you, thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day.